You're listening to Back to Us Radio on the Back to Us Network.
Good evening, Strong Stance listeners. This show is a special one because this show marks the beginning of a new flavor of the Strong Stance, storytelling. These particular episodes will feature all types of stories from all types of trans and gender non-conforming people. And the aim is to showcase our community's voices and lived experiences and to provide an outlet for art and expression. We are continually looking for stories, and at the end of the show, I'll give you more information about how to submit those stories if you're interested. Now, I have to tell you, as a fan of storytelling and storytelling podcasts personally, this is something I've wanted to do for quite a while now, so I have high hopes for where this stream of the Strong Stance can go. But let's talk about today's episode. I'm calling today's show About Face. These stories showcase a few of the ways in which we present ourselves to the world around us and how those performances and presentations affect our lives moving forward. Is the face that we show to the world the same one we see in the mirror? How do we view society and how are we viewed in it? And will these experiences change the trajectory of our future and how we move through our daily lives? Welcome to the Strong Stance Stories. Since this is our first installment, as the show's host, I will be the one to break the proverbial ice with a story about an experience from my own past. Growing up before my transition, I was always taught to be wary of strangers. The competing ideas of don't talk to strangers and say please and thank you always kind of confused me as a child. When is it appropriate to be afraid of those I don't know, and when should I be friendly? This wasn't exactly something that my toddler brain was great at discerning. But as I grew up, I started to grasp the concept of polite yet cautious interaction. Just as I began to learn that difference, who I should specifically be cautious around began to take a more definitive shape. Men, specifically at night when I was alone. In my teens and early 20s, I was taught all the ways I could and should protect myself. I developed an awareness for who was around me at all times, from dusk to dawn, but I tried not to let it affect where I went and when. I watched shadows on the sidewalk of those walking behind me. I avoided walking near groups if I was alone. I locked my doors as soon as I got into my car or my apartment. And when I was younger, I even occasionally walked with my keys between my fingers. College friends often told me that as a butch lesbian, no one would ever dare lay a hand on me for fear that I would kick their ass. And then I would have to explain again and again that rape is often an act of power and control, and that there have been plenty of lesbians that have been raped by men to either put her in her place or straighten her out. I was constantly told that anything could happen to anyone, and that I had to protect myself from becoming that anyone. I knew that anyone could be raped. I knew that most rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. I knew all the statistics, or I thought at the time. And after I transitioned, I still remembered those things. But now my fear was that someone would harm me because I was transgender, rather than because I was a woman. And once I was seen as a man and no longer being misgendered, I didn't feel as personally aware on a constant basis. I relaxed into the life of being mostly left alone and mostly unaffected by all of the precautions I used to take. And then came the day that I realized how the world now saw me. I was walking home from work. At the time, I worked in DuPont Circle in downtown Washington, D.C., and lived a 15-minute walk east where Logan Circle meets the Shaw neighborhood. It was dusk, and as the sun set in the west behind me, the shadows stretched long in front of me. Each passing block, the number of people on the sidewalk dwindled, and usually, by the time I was on my block, I was often the only one. But there was a woman walking several paces ahead of me that day, and I guess she had been there for the past few blocks, but honestly, I hadn't really noticed. As we were crossing through Logan Circle, I noticed her glance over her shoulder once or twice, and then clutch her things closer and slightly quicken her pace. We exited the circle, still heading the same direction, and just after she crossed the street, a half a block from my apartment, she glanced over her shoulder again, quickened her pace once more, and quickly crossed the street away from me. And then it hit me. I was now the person that I had been taught to be aware of. I was now the person that women had been taught to be aware of. I hadn't given it much thought before then, perhaps because it hadn't been that long since I was seen as female. Perhaps it was because I was small for a man, 5'4" and no more than 140 pounds. But the reality remained. I was an able-bodied, white man in my 20s. I was a stranger. So while I was thinking about my day at work, my wife, then girlfriend, waiting at home for me, and thinking about what we were going to do for dinner, the woman in front of me was possibly thinking about what she would do if I attacked her. She possibly saw me as the threat she had always been warned about. Since that day and that tiny event, I started to notice a number of ways in which my actions were perceived differently as a man than when I was seen as a woman. I wondered if I said hello to a stranger, particularly a woman, if she thought I was being creepy or trying to hit on her. Or if I smiled at a child on the metro, did his parents think I was a predator? And this led me to change the way I interacted with strangers in public. I gave more space than was necessary. I was careful about the words I chose when speaking to people. I tried not to make eye contact on public transportation. And I tried not to find myself or put myself in situations that may have made others uncomfortable with my presence. The way the world saw me had changed, so I changed the way in which I interacted with the world. I sincerely hope that woman that crossed the street that evening wasn't afraid of me, but I certainly wouldn't blame her or judge her if she was. She was just following everything she had been taught, everything we had both been taught. That you be careful around strangers, particularly the ones coming up behind you at night, particularly the men. Our next story comes to us from a familiar voice here on The Strong Stance, Tracy McDaniel, with a truly once-in-a-lifetime performance. Here's Tracy.
Chapter 11, 1996, the year that transformed my life. Several months or so after resolving my feelings around being single again, I was directing all of my attention and energies on career and advancement opportunities. I continued working part-time at the advertising agency during the day and then entertaining in the clubs on the weekends. A couple of months after Patrick, my manager at the time, and I started our whirlwind collaboration, I received a phone call from him. He mysteriously said, "Destiny, darling, you would never guess what I have to tell you." "What, Patrick?" was all I could say. "Are you sitting down?" The joy and excitement in his voice informed me that he was calling with a major proposal, so I could only keep responding as he continued torturing me. "What is it, Patrick?" He finally replied, "I scheduled you an interview to audition tomorrow afternoon with a veteran music producer, Marty Arnia, to be a backup singer in the new Diana Ross music video, I Will Survive, which is being used to promote her latest album." I could not believe it. All I could do was scream really loudly, asking, "Are you serious, Patrick? Are you serious?" "Honey, I am serious," he replied. After grabbing my appointment calendar from my purse, I asked, "What is the place and time of the audition, Patrick?" After confirming that I'd picked Patrick up so that we'd arrive together at the audition at least 30 minutes early, I hung up and collapsed on the couch in gratitude. As I relaxed there for several minutes, I felt that, in a way, this opportunity was what I really needed to celebrate my newfound freedom. I was overjoyed with overwhelming excitement about the possibilities of meeting Miss Diana Ross and working on her video. You talk about a dream coming to fruition right before my eyes. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, Universe, was all I could say to myself. Patrick and I arrived at the casting office early on the day of my audition, and I performed an I'm Coming Out, Ain't No Mountain High Enough medley. According to Patrick, I was booked on the spot to appear in the video because the camera guy did not want to stop filming as he was being mesmerized by my performance. Soon after my audition, the most surreal for me up to that point occurred on January the 17th, 1996, just a few days before my birthday. It was then that it hit me at my core. I had just spent hours filming a high-profile music video with a living legend that I have been inspired by ever since starting to impersonate her many years ago at La Cage aux Folles, Beverly Hills. I believed it when Patrick informed me that it was a very rare occasion for Ms. Ross to use impersonators in her shows and videos, for that matter. If I'm not mistaken, she has not used impersonators since the I Will Survive video. I really did not comprehend the historical relevance of being chosen to have participated in such a monumental event, and not to mention the positive effect that the experience has had on my professional career at that time. The morning after my audition at the studio in Hollywood, after reconfirming my set call time for the video shoot with Patrick, I recall from that time forward consciously savoring every single minute of the experience. It began with packing almost 3 weeks before the production after repairing my best silver sequin gown, which was hand-sewn for me by Crystal. I accessorized the ensemble with a pair of silver Fredericks of Hollywood pumps and polished rhinestone jewelry, most likely purchased at one of the costume jewelry places on Hollywood Boulevard. On the day of the amazing music video shoot that I've experienced to date, I didn't want to take any chances of getting stuck in the unpredictably crazy Los Angeles traffic, driving from West LA to West Hollywood, or whatever unforeseen event that might cause me to be late for my call time. So I arrived on set almost 3 hours before my scheduled time, claiming a prime corner spot in the dressing trailer that the backup performers were assigned. After checking in with the production assistant, I had plenty of time before rehearsals to take a stroll by the Club Rage to climb a tree. Those of you whom have climbed a tree or climbed trees know what climb a tree means. Just for a little bit of energy boost. Later that day, after Patrick joined me on the set, I was selected by one of the video producers and video director, Marty Collier, to stand in for Ms. Ross' dress rehearsal for the video opening scene. It was such an honor and privilege to have been chosen to rehearse her scenes. Later that evening, the energy was extremely elevated, almost beyond the stratosphere on Santa Monica Boulevard, as we launched into a night of 1,000 Dianas. A portion of the longest street in the entire city was closed off to traffic due to it being filled with thousands admiring Diana Ross fans, rivaling the West Hollywood annual Halloween celebrations and parades. The fans were patiently anticipating her appearance onto the float and erupted into loud applause. When the 4 features lined up to be ushered onto the float by our choreographer for last-minute rehearsals. But before we were allowed on the float, M. David, a self-proclaimed ultimate Diana Ross lookalike, was informed by the production assistant that Ms. Ross did not promote wearing fur, so he was not allowed to take a huge foxtail stole onto the set. Shortly after